It would have been better if I simply used a second email account and carried a second phone, but at the time, this didn't seem like an issue.
I am not a crook. American history has more than its fair share of shocking political scandals. This day in 1974 marks the beginning of the impeachment proceedings of Richard Nixon following the Watergate scandal. What political controversy do you find the most scandalous? Let us know in the comments.
The Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers refers to a top-secret government report on America's political and military involvement in the Vietnam War. The study, which was carried out at the behest of then-Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, was leaked to the New York Times in 1971 by a military analyst named Daniel Ellsberg.
Proof the U.S. government was lying about its role in the Vietnam War. Ellsberg exposes that lie to the world.
The papers apparently showed that multiple presidential administrations, from Harry Truman's to Lyndon B. Johnson's, had misled Congress and the American public on the exact scale of U.S. involvement in Vietnam. This leak infuriated then-President Nixon, whose attempt to block the publication of the documents was superseded by a landmark Supreme Court decision.
But a 6-3 decision in the Supreme Court soon said the government had no right to stop the publication.
This would set in motion the chain of events that led to the infamous Watergate scandal. More on that later.
It was a seismic event.
The Crédit Mobilier scandal. In the thick of the 1872 re-election campaign of Ulysses S. Grant, a major scandal erupted that involved several politicians and executives of the Union Pacific Railroad.
The scam began with executives from the Union Pacific Railroad Company.
After being contracted by the U.S. government to construct a portion of the first transcontinental railroad, Thomas C. Durant, the vice president of Union Pacific, devised a cunning scam. He created the fake construction company Crédit Mobilier of America, with which he billed the government $94 million for a project that only cost $50 million.
The inflated profits cheated the federal government out of millions of dollars.
Most of the excess cash was shared among the company executives, while some of it was used to bribe multiple politicians, including then Vice President Schuyler Colfax. Although the scandal destroyed the reputations of many involved, no criminal charges were officially filed.
When this came out, it was a huge scandal. 1/3 of the members of Congress were thrown out of office in the election of 1874.
The whiskey ring scandal. Fending off scandals was apparently a normal day at the Ulysses S. Grant White House. During the president's second administration, a ring of corruption was exposed by the Secretary of Treasury, Benjamin Bristow.
The Depression was followed by another scandal known as the Whiskey Ring.
Operating mostly in St. Louis, Missouri, the Whiskey Ring was organized in 1871 by Republican operatives claiming to raise money for their party candidates. In actuality, whiskey distillers in the group bribed federal agents to evade government taxes and keep huge profits for themselves. The scandal implicated John McDonald, a Treasury Department official appointed by Grant himself, and Grant's own private secretary, Orville Babcock. McDonald was convicted and sentenced to prison, while Babcock was acquitted after Grant testified to his innocence.
Although it was never proven that Grant himself was involved in any of these misdeeds, his administration suffered greatly in the eyes of the public.
The Keating Five. Long before the notorious How to Get Away with Murder quintet, the original Keating Five generated a huge controversy. In 1989, news broke that U.S. Senators Alan Cranston, Dennis DeConcini, John Glenn, Donald Regal Jr., and John McCain had improperly interfered in a federal investigation of Lincoln Savings and Loan Association.
Lincoln Savings was the worst, what we call in criminology, control fraud in the nation. That means a fraud run by the people who control the organization, in this case, Charles Keating.
The financial institution was being probed when its chairman, Charles Keating Jr., who had made campaign contributions to all 5 senators, had them intervene on his behalf.
5 senators were showered with Keating gifts in exchange for putting the squeeze on federal regulators.
The federal agency backed off initially, but after Lincoln went under in 1989 and needed over $3 billion in bailouts, the scandal came to light. Following a chaotic investigation, only one of the 5 senators was formally reprimanded by the Senate Ethics Committee.
Keating served 4 years in prison for bankruptcy fraud.
The Teapot Dome scandal.
The Teapot Dome scandal was probably the most significant presidential scandal in American history in the 20th century.
After President Warren G. Harding took office in 1929, he appointed several of his close friends and associates to high-ranking positions. This group later became known as the Ohio Gang, one of whom was Harding's Interior Secretary, Albert Fall. In 1922, Harding transferred control of 3 naval oil fields to the Department of Interior. 2 of these reserves were located in California and the 3rd in Teapot Dome, Wyoming. This move allowed Fall to lease the drilling rights for these fields to private oil companies without open bidding, in exchange for large bribes.
The US Senate launched an investigation. They discovered Secretary Fall's family had mysteriously received $200,000 worth of government bonds.
Although the scandal first broke before Harding's death in August 1923, Fall's eventual conviction and 1-year imprisonment wouldn't happen until years later.
Meanwhile, Albert Bacon Fall was sent to jail.
Bill Clinton-Monica Lewinsky affair. When it comes to political sex scandals in America, there's arguably none quite as infamous as that involving then-President Bill Clinton and former White House intern Monica Lewinsky.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
The two had maintained a clandestine relationship between 1995 and 1997. While under federal investigation for another controversy, the details of Clinton's affair with Lewinsky found their way into the hands of the independent counsel, Ken Starr. To make matters worse, both Clinton and Lewinsky denied the relationship under oath, which paved the way for perjury charges to be brought against the president.
As a somber House of Representatives voted for only the 2nd time in American history to impeach a president of the United States.
In December 1998, Clinton was impeached by the House of Representatives, but ended up serving his full term after eventually being acquitted by the Senate.
The said William Jefferson Clinton be and he hereby is acquitted of the charges in the said articles.
NSA Surveillance Controversy. Edward Snowden will go down as one of the most prominent whistleblowers in U.S. history.
When you are subverting the power of government, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to democracy.
In 2013, Snowden, who was working as a contractor for the NSA at the time, leaked highly classified documents to notable publications such as The Guardian and The Washington Post. These documents revealed that the NSA, in tandem with telecommunications companies, had carried out widespread surveillance on American citizens and some high-profile foreign nationals. The ensuing scandal caused increased public distrust in government agencies, and in 2020, the program was ruled illegal and possibly unconstitutional by a federal court in the U.S.
Illegal, ineffective, and unnecessary. That is essentially what the 5-member Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board said about the National Security Agency's collection of phone data from millions of Americans.
Snowden first fled the country to Hong Kong before eventually settling in Russia, where he was granted citizenship in 2022.
He has said previously that having this Russian citizenship would allow him to be able to cross borders more freely.
Donald Trump's involvement in the January 6th insurrection. After Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 presidential election, Donald Trump refused to concede, instead alleging widespread voter fraud without any evidence to prove it. On January 6, 2021, while Congress convened in the U.S. Capitol to certify the electoral results, Trump spoke to a rally of his supporters a few miles away.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness.
After his speech, in which he implored the crowd to fight like hell to save their country, thousands stormed the Capitol building. Trump's involvement in the attack led to him getting impeached for the 2nd time by the House of Representatives.
Donald Trump will now go down in history as the only American president to be impeached twice.
Following his exit from office, Trump held on to several classified documents, most of which were recovered during the widely reported FBI search of his Mar-a-Lago residence.
It was related to classified information the former president allegedly took with him to Mar-a-Lago after leaving the White House.
The Iran-Contra affair. In 1986, during his 2nd term in office, the Ronald Reagan administration was rocked by a political scandal that threatened his presidency. Dubbed the Iran-Contra affair, the issue revolved around a secret sale of weapons to Iran in exchange for the freedom of 7 American hostages held in Lebanon. This was illegal as the Middle Eastern nation had been placed under an arms embargo.
This happened even though Reagan publicly insisted he would not negotiate with terrorists, and despite the fact that there was a trade embargo with Iran.
In addition, the administration officials who facilitated the sale then used part of the profits to fund the Nicaraguan anti-communist Contras. This was in direct violation of the Boland Amendment, which prohibited American aid to the group.
In 1986, the Lebanese newspaper Al-Shura reported the arms deal, and everything began to unravel.
Although Reagan himself was cleared of any wrongdoing, several of his senior officials were indicted and later found guilty.
Yet, speculation about Reagan's involvement lingered on. Press investigations would go on for years to follow.
Watergate. The Watergate scandal has largely defined scandals as we know them today. On June 17, 1972, 5 burglars were arrested after breaking into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate complex. They were soon connected to the Nixon administration and his 1972 re-election campaign. While it's still unknown if Nixon was aware of the break-in beforehand, he proceeded to do anything possible to cover it up.
This principle of confidentiality of presidential conversations is at stake in the question of these tapes. I must and I shall oppose any efforts to destroy this principle, which is so vital to the conduct of this great office.
This constituted an abuse of power and deliberate obstruction of justice. After being incriminated by his own taped recordings of Oval Office conversations, the House Judiciary Committee approved articles of impeachment.
The Supreme Court rules unanimously that President Nixon must turn over subpoenaed material to Watergate prosecutor Jaworski.
Facing almost certain removal from office, Nixon resigned on August 9, 1974, becoming the first U.S. president to ever do so.
And so we leave with high hopes, in good spirit.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from Watch Mojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.